On June 21, 1970, the largest railroad in America filed for bankruptcy, and no one saw it coming, even though the warning signs were everywhere. What made this collapse so stunning wasn't just the scale, it was the speed. The Pennsylvania Railroad and the New York Central Railroad had dominated American rail transport for over a century combined. Together, they moved freight and passengers across the Northeast Corridor with an almost monarchical grip on commerce. Then, in the span of a single business day, that grip simply opened. To understand how this happened, we need to step back to 1966. That's when the two giants merged into one entity, Penn Central. On paper, it looked like a masterstroke. Combine the Pennsylvania's freight dominance with the New York Central's passenger network, eliminate redundancy, and you'd have an unstoppable force. The men who engineered this deal, corporate strategists operating under the best information they had, saw only synergy. But they didn't account for one thing. The world was changing faster than a century-old monopoly could adapt. Trucks were eating into freight, airplanes were stealing passengers. The interstate highway system, ironically funded by federal dollars, was systematically dismantling the economic moat that rail had built for 150 years. Penn Central's executives inherited a business model that was already obsolete. The merger itself revealed the first crack. Integrating two massive bureaucracies proved catastrophically difficult. Freight routes conflicted, personnel decisions paralyzed management. The company was now fighting itself while fighting the market. Between 1966 and 1968, Penn Central's stock price began a quiet descent. Most investors didn't panic yet. By 1968, the numbers were telling a story that the board still wasn't reading clearly. Debt was climbing, revenue was falling. The company was spending more money to move freight that generated less profit. It was a vicious cycle, and each quarter made it worse. Yet the leadership team kept betting that things would turn around, a decision made under genuine uncertainty with incomplete foresight. The company borrowed heavily to stay afloat. Banks extended credit because Penn Central was too big to fail, or so everyone assumed. By early 1970, the railroad was carrying over $2 billion in debt. That's roughly $16 billion in today's dollars. The interest payments alone were strangling cash flow. Spring 1970 arrived, and the situation turned critical. The railroad was burning cash faster than it could generate it. Management faced a brutal choice: secure emergency financing or admit insolvency. They chose to fight. They approached the federal government and major banks, pleading for a lifeline. The answer was no. By June 1970, Penn Central's treasurer knew the truth that the board was still reckoning with. They had maybe weeks of operating capital left. Not months, weeks. The company couldn't meet payroll or pay suppliers. Every decision made in those final days was made under the weight of knowing collapse was imminent, yet hoping, still hoping, for a reprieve that never came. June 21, 1970. It was a Sunday. The board met in an atmosphere of quiet desperation. The decision was unanimous: file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Penn Central, which moved 18% of all freight in America, which employed over 80,000 people, which had operated without interruption since before the Civil War was finished. The announcement hit Monday morning like a financial earthquake. The numbers were staggering: $2, $1 billion in debt, $8, $6 billion in assets that were suddenly frozen. Creditors lined up to claim what they could. Shareholders watched their investment evaporate. Employees learned their pensions were at risk. The ripple effects spread across the entire Northeast economy. What's critical to understand is that this wasn't sudden in the way a plane crash is sudden. The structural problems had been accumulating for decades. The merger in 1966 was supposed to solve them. Instead, it accelerated them. Every executive decision made in good faith, with the information available at the time, pushed the company closer to collapse. The aftermath was a slow-motion disaster. Passenger service was eventually taken over by Amtrak. Freight operations were broken up and sold piecemeal. The bankruptcy proceedings dragged on for 6 years. When the dust settled, Penn Central's assets were worth a fraction of what creditors were owed. The largest railroad bankruptcy in American history became a textbook case in how monopolies fail when the world changes faster than they can. The lesson here isn't that the executives were incompetent. Many of them were seasoned railroad men making strategic calls under genuine uncertainty. The lesson is harder: dominance doesn't guarantee survival. Market conditions shift, technology disrupts. And when an organization is too invested in defending what it is, it becomes too slow to become what it needs to be. Penn Central filed for bankruptcy on a Sunday morning in June 1970. It was the largest corporate failure the nation had ever seen. And yet, if you look at the quarterly reports from 1968 and 1969, the warning signs were visible to anyone willing to read them. The question isn't why it collapsed. The question is why no one acted decisively when there was still time. Subscribe to get the full story behind every corporate collapse, where the decisions were made and what they cost.